Psychoanalysis Children Find Fathers Part 2. Namaste. So far in Part 1, we have talked about different types of fathers and what fatherhood is all about. And under the lens of psychoanalysis, we touched few of the topics which have been raising lot many other questions. To carry on further with the discussion with our subject expert, Dr. Himanshu Vaidya. Welcome, sir.
Namaste.
So, taking the discussion ahead, uh, father being one of the most iconic, that is how we all assume, and that is the ideal way, iconic personality, most iconic relationship. Does that mean that there are certain criteria there it which is to do with the courageous fathers and cowardly fathers?
It does make a difference if the father is courageous or cowardly. One element that the child learns is by direct internalization, which is unconscious. Whatever is in front of you, to some extent, you definitely internalize it in early life.
True.
So, a cowardly father or a courageous father, to some extent, get automatically internalized. There is another element of conscious internalization.
Hmm.
That if the child has a courageous father, it helps him evoke his masculinity, his courage, his archetypal hero inside. He develops a template that it is safe to be courageous. The world is a safe place. You can show courage and still survive. He is freed to a great extent from catastrophic thinking. So automatically many healthy things build up in him if he is with a courageous father. And therefore, partly consciously also, he may start liking it, mimicking it, and therefore internalize semi-consciously, so to say, the courageous father. The third element relates to people admiring the father, and therefore to be somebody like him, he internalizes. And the fourth is to match up in the Oedipal rivalry, that he has to match up the courageous father for an Oedipal victory or even an Oedipal contest at the least. And therefore the internalization happens. And as I said, with the courageous father, lack of catastrophic thinking, which is a very healthy thing. It's almost like a hypostrophic thinking, the opposite of catastrophic thinking. That gets internalized. Positivity is instituted. The world is a safe place. One can show courage and still survive, and not to take anything lying down, and to counter question, to be entrepreneurial, to be uh, ready to take on leadership positions, to oppose the powerful. All those virtuous qualities get ingrained if you are with a courageous father. If you are with a cowardly father, many things can happen. One, you can have a direct internalization and you may turn out just like him. This is more true in very low socioeconomic category, where people have no choice but to be docile and submissive, given their socioeconomic status. And that gets passed on to the next generation. And that, apart from a psychological internalization, is also a survival process. That there is no way they can survive without being that. So that can be a second element of internalizing a cowardly father, where the internalization also at the same time is a survival coping strategy. The third would be that somebody is constitutionally very strong. He has some other non-father heroic or courageous figures that he internalizes either around him or from the media, and he does not want to align with the father. And then there is a clash between an automatically internalized father and the ideal father he personally likes, and what he would like to emulate. So then there is this ideal father and the automatically internalized father, and both of them are in conflict. And he
In
was
current times, most of the generations they talk about, oh, I have a alpha father, I have a sigma father,
right.
and many don't relate to it at all.
Correct. Correct. So then it becomes a question of the ideal father versus the real internalized father, and which way it goes. And any in some cases it may just be a struggle between the two, and the man is not able to go decisively anywhere. However, if the real is despised or hated, then it creates a very difficult situation, because then the search for the ideal figure begins, and we never know where it's going to end. It may not end in teenage, it may not even end in the youth, it may end in the Middle Ages, maybe with some guru or some celebrity or some businessman or a political leader. So we don't know where it will end. It has very strong implications for the journey of life and the quality of life.
When we look at fathers and when we look at men, the masculine establishing themselves in society, a lot is identified uh, with success, to see the man as a successful, established, ideal man. So does success in society not change the father the child sees?
It does. It's the classic rich dad, poor dad syndrome. There will be very few children who will idealize the father despite the father not being socially successful. In most cases, a failed father is looked down upon, either with anger or with pity. One can go back to Carl Jung's story that
That is.
he saw his father as a very weak, incompetent, a failure in life, a hypochondriac. And it came to his light most vividly when Jung was passed through the ceremony towards priesthood. And it
Mm,
was believed that at that ceremony one has divine experiences. Jung had none. And at that point, Jung says he realized the tragedy of his father. That father has had no experiences he was speaking of. It was just a performance he was doing to keep the family bills going. And that was the tragedy of his life, that all of his life he had to pretend to believe and pretend to have some knowledge of divine experiences, which none of which was true. And Jung says that he was at once filled with pity at the tragic condition of his father. No wonder Jung required Freud to awaken his masculinity. The
true.
bold, the brave, the courageous man standing alone against the whole establishment of his time, the hero. And Jung needed that real life hero to awaken the masculinity and the hero inside of him. It's only after meeting with Freud that the evocation took place, and he was finally able to break free even from Freud and then prevailing views both on the medical side and on the Freudian side. So it often fills people with pity, but in any way, in no circumstances they look up to the man. There would be rarest of the rare that somebody will still idealize him as a wounded hero. But most will look down upon him, and that has very strong implications for the child's mind. Awakening of masculinity, awakening of the spirit of enterprise, awakening of fortitude, awakening of
Let's.
courage. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I interrupted you in between. But when we see, there are many socially known, well established men who are seen as alpha men or who are very successful, but their children couldn't bear that success further as a legacy because they were doing best in their own ways, but society sees them as failures just because they didn't choose the same path as their father did, or probably they had too much of expectation of the society. So, beyond the analytic version of this, what kind of lens do you use here when they have this over responsibility of, showing up just like their fathers, being courageous enough, being an alpha male, or being very successful? That also sometimes lead to the opposite part of the spectrum where they become totally incapable.
So I was just about to come to that part, but let me just finish the because that's the reverse of what we are talking about.
Hmm.
So we have talked about the benefits of the courageous father and the losses with regard to the cowardly father.
Cowardly fathers.
And now let us talk in the reverse of it. The
Mm.
benefit of the cowardly father and the losses of the successful father.
Yes, yes.
So the benefits of a cowardly father often are that the stress is not there and anything you do is a victory because you're comparing yourself to a very low datum. So that is the easy part. And there are people who are not like their fathers and very different, and they turn out to be brave, internalizing somebody else and not internalizing the father on this account. Constitution also plays a very strong role.
True.
The mothers and other figures around play a strong role. Somebody, for example, going to, let us say, an ideological place, maybe an RSS Shakha or a Madarsa or any ideological place. He is told stories of valor, of heroes, of whatever that place is, and he is enjoined to be like them. Say somebody going to Gurudwara and listening to the Sikh history. Even if the father is not courageous, he is presented with courageous father figures. And that
True.
can result in internalization and setting up of ideals.
Hmm.
And this is very important, the setting up of ideals with reference to the father. That the courageous father sets it too high, the cowardly father sets it too low, and both have, in general, there is a profit in courageous father and a loss in cowardly father, and in exception, the opposite. The profit in cowardly father and the loss in the courageous father. Now let's come to the loss part of it. One of the difficulties of a successful father or a courageous father is this. Your reference then is a genius. And this is most dramatically seen in the business world or the political world or the film world. Amitabh
Even
Bachchan's
in
child.
even in history, many kings.
Yeah. So even Amitabh Bachchan's child is nowhere near Amitabh Bachchan. Um, you can see children of very successful politicians are nowhere near them. Same is true for business. And children of very courageous and very successful parents, they have tremendous pressure in which they grow up. And in fact, many of them are frustrated across life because they
Hmm.
are constantly compared to an
Hmm.
extraordinary person.
Hmm.
It's like they are duty bound to be a genius because they are children of a genius, which can never happen. If you look at business, 70% of businesses don't succeed in the second generation the way they succeeded in the first.
First generation.
And almost 80 to 90% of businesses, they fail by the time they reach the third generation. And it's very few businesses which actually cross the third generation. And the same thing applies that the children need not be anywhere near to the father. So it also puts a lot of pressure if you have a successful or a courageous father to be like him, and the child may not just be cut out for it, and he may just crumble under the weight of it. It's a
Yeah.
tremendous frustration. And I have known people who said, I don't want to be a businessman like my father. I would better be a chef or uh, a, a teacher or something, but I can't do it in this city.
It's more like a shadowing father, like the shadow is so magnificent that nothing grows in that shade.
True. And people don't accept if you become anything else.
Even it is just not to do with the success and ideal versions, but also I've seen many, even in small setups like villages, if the father is a very morally correct person, their children are not able to live up to that expectations of others on to upon them, so they tend to be these petty criminals. It's just the opposite of it's. We want you to put some light there, whether it is an Oedipal revenge, what takes out this, or it's just a social element of expectation, which brought everything mixed together.
Yeah, there can be an element of Oedipal revenge, and there may also be other pent up anger against the father,
Hmm.
especially if the father has been overbearing.
Yeah.
Because many moral people are, they are very overbearing, and therefore children revolt, and in defiance, they will do something which they don't intend to do except as an act of revenge. So it may be like a girl running away with somebody in the Indian context,
Hmm.
or a male child committing some small crime so that he is caught and a bad name comes to the family. So,
But that's mostly unconscious
yeah.
at play.
So that also is one dynamic which can happen. And then there is this statistical thing that if 5% people are going to be on the sociopathic, psychopathic trajectory, it just accidentally can be that this man turns out to be one of them.
Hmm. So, when we look at this entire spectrum, we have just explored the two extremes. What about the mediocre Indian family father, or maybe in an ordinary father in any context, and a socially resourceful father?
Um, an ordinary father is respected generally till the acuteness of his resourcelessness is felt. It is there that for the first time, the child realizes that my father is not resourceful. And this can happen if there is a sickness in the family where large sums of money or contact is required and the father can't pull it off. Or the child gets out of standard 10th or 12th and he has to take admission. And the father says he just has to follow the procedure, he can't do anything other than that. Or donation has to be paid to some college for an admission and the father can't. Or after going into the college, the child has to go for internship and the father is unable to do anything on that front and the child is running from pillar to post to get an internship. Or he gets out of the college and he is looking out for a job and there's nothing the father can do. Or he is about to get married in the Indian context I'm referring to, and the father is not able to get anything near to what he wants as a partner. So all these are instances where that non-resourcefulness just hits the child in the face. So in many cases, it even though the father is not very resourceful, the average median father, as you said, it just passes on. The child never realizes it. But these are the instances where it hits on the face, and that is where the partial looking down on the father starts. And the respect goes down, and the internalization sort of starts of somebody else, and the drawing of the strength and energy from the internalized father that goes weak, because what has been internalized has to be found to be very weak. It's not the emperor has no clothes, but emperor has half the clothes.
Right.
So that temporarily creates a very high loss of confidence, the loss of self-image, and a sense of helplessness. That internalized omnipotence erodes away. And therefore, the child either has to internalize someone else and stabilize the situation in the inner world, or he has to go out knowing fully well that now he is on to his own. And that creates quite some amount of fortitude, struggle, but also some hatred and anger towards the father. that he is not able to make life as easy as many other fathers are, and the child is now on his own. So this creates a different dynamic, and it's almost a point where the internalized confidence, internalized self-assurance, internalized safety that reduces, and it will take years before the child regains it on his own merit.
Throughout the discussion, repeatedly, we have been using this word of internalizing the father, good father, bad father, not so good father. How does this internalization of the father actually happens?
There are three, four things about it. One is the simple fact of internalization of whatever is in front of us in early childhood, it gets internalized. It's like inside there is the need for data from outside to evoke something inside. It's almost like an archetypal evocation by a real figure in the real world, which evokes that archetypal mechanism inside. So in early life, whatever is outside is internalized. You have a good mother, you internalize. You have a dead mother, you internalize. You have a cold mother, you internalize. You have an absent father, you internalize. You have a attacking father, you internalize. Whatever is present in front of you, internalize. And this brings about philosophically what is called the thrownness of our existence. That we find ourselves like there is a sense of a accidentality to our arrival.
Mhm.
That we find something around us and we internalize, right? Which is, it's a form of learning. You take things in, and we saw before that we can take things in many ways: incorporation, internalization, identification. All of these processes happen. Now, internalization is when you take something from outside in and you process it, and that undergoes a change, that gets internalized and undergoes a process, undergoes a change, but a reasonable part of it remains inside as it was outside.
So
Now, what,
some essence is extracted of whatever has been observed
correct. In very early life, literally it's taken in
as it
and
is.
not processed much. Later on, it's taken in and processed, and then identification happens. So the
And
internalization,
who processes this here?
the unconscious.
The unconscious. No, which element of the unconscious? It
It
is
is
governed by all three.
it's
It
governed
also
by all the
correct.
three, but it's a built-in hardware mechanism.
A
It's
different
auto
permutation combinations takes place there.
correct. Correct. It's built in that whatever is there, it's a learning thing. Like the very fundamental part of a human mind is that we come with an open system, not with a preloaded application software.
True.
Like we have Windows 95, we don't have Word and PowerPoint. The Word and PowerPoint have to be built as the internal system reacts with the outside. Other animals have the application software also preloaded, and therefore they can repeat the same thing very well, but they can't think anything new.
Mm.
We want to keep the system clean so that whatever historical age the person is entering in, he is able to internalize that. So 1,000 years back, somebody will learn how to live in an era of chariots, and today you live in the era of drones. So the outside keeps changing. And if we were to come out with a preloaded software, we can't adjust to the changing outside. And therefore, we come with a preloaded operating system, but not a preloaded application software. So that is where the system, the way nature has put it is, the operating system interacts with the outside world to create that application software. And therefore, the application software is unique for each of us and unique across generations over time. So whatever is in front of us, we internalize. Very early, it's literally taken in. Slowly, it is more metaphorically taken in and processed. Initially, it's not processed so much. What comes in the way is rage and envy. If rage and envy are very high, we may resist internalization. Or even if it happens unknowingly, there will be a contest between the internalized voice and the choice of the person. So this contest between the voice and the choice, that will trouble the person. That the internalized images will say something and what he wants is something else. So
sometimes in therapy, that is a point of big point of healing and releasing of effect, when this conflict goes forever or it just reveals itself.
correct, correct. So the most common situation of a human psyche is that opposite things coexist together and alternately activate and deactivate. They neither integrate nor come to any synthesis unless you really consciously work upon it. So this happens here. The internalization is the natural process, happens unconsciously, and rage and envy can inhibit it. The presence of the father is very important. The absence can be very inhibiting, or the absence of good father figures can be inhibiting. Or then
Many times I have seen that in search of father, people tend to have multiple affairs and ending up with similar kind of a father-like figure in their life.
correct,
For men, it can be in non-romantic relationships as choosing the bossy friends or even the bosses they live with. For women, it can be to do with multiple affairs of that of a romantic way. So is it that internalization is trying to re-establish and do something with it? Was the internalization itself not a complete process?
correct.
So
So
whatever we internalize, and the voice and the choice, when you talk about, it is also to own up one's own masculinity self as a trait within oneself. But what happens to that internalization when we project it onto the others people?
right,
What is the need of doing so in that because when we say internalization, there is a kind of a notion that, once you have internalized, it's enough, but something here is still not finished, it is
correct.
incomplete. So what it is which is not fully internalized and you're yet seeking or validating outside?
Uh, for most people, the internalization is not good and adequate.
Hmm.
Very few people it's good and adequate.
Hmm.
A majority it's not good and adequate. So what happens is ki the adequacy part, the search always is on. And the good part, the qualitative search is always on. And therefore, the search doesn't cease. And the moment you get an opportunity, the search activates. In personality disorders and in psychosis, we can see it very, very clearly. In practically every personality disorder, the search for good parents is always on. And that is practically true for everyone in one sense. So very few people would have the search completed. Most will be in search, either quantitatively or qualitatively. And many of them will be in conflict with what has been internalized and what they want, they would have wanted it to be.
So the quest people hold for enlightenment or achieving for sense of, meeting one's higher self, sometimes it is very confusing whether it is this inadequate internalization or this is the sole purpose which is showing itself. How do we distinguish between these two, whether they are that is the path which from where we begin and then gradually things change, what it is about? If we see the spiritual seeking, the quest we have of something.
So these are two different kind of internalizations. In psychoanalysis, we are referring to internalization with reference to health. And in spirituality, we are referring to something in relation to fulfillment. Standards are very different. The psychoanalytic standards are much lower, that one should have internalized enough to live as a healthy person without symptoms. But that healthy person without symptoms also will not have a sense of fulfillment. And spirituality talks about enlightenment with a sense of fulfillment. So the type of internalization we are referring to is much different.
Okay.
In spirituality, the type of internalization we are referring to is very, very different and much higher level. For example, uh, it is normal for anyone to live comfortably for 3-4 days and then start feeling lonely, because there's a shelf life of the recently internalized, that you meet somebody and the memory of that and the internalization of that, the temporary part of it, remains for 2-3 days, and then you start feeling lonely again.
Mm.
That's normal. And that in that kind of internalization, we will say healthy enough, good enough internalization from an analytic point of view.
Okay.
But if I put you into a cave in Himalayas and you are not to see anybody for 6 months, that is not the standard of psychoanalysis. It's a more of a spiritual standard. There, the kind of internalization required is a very different type. So there we are looking at much higher, much deeper, much rounded internalization of a good, reliable, stable object happening. And to aid that, you have so many spiritual practices to aid, to take you from a healthy level internalization to a fulfillment level internalization.
Mm.
And some people never reach there. They are near it, but they don't reach it. So there we are talking of a 1 in a million case who has that kind of an internalization, where he can live for months without anybody. Because what he has internalized has a very long shelf life. Some will even say it's forever. So that's a very different kind of internalization. And the problems with the ordinary internalization can also be seen in spiritual internalization. You can still have rage against God. You can still have envy against God.
You have in the past talked about father of big other. Can we capture it here more?
Lacan brought in this concept of the big other. So his idea was that if you metaphorize the father and generalize the concept, because this is what Lacan primarily does. A substantial part of Lacan is actually metaphorizing and generalizing Freud.
Sir, can you come again?
Okay. I divide Lacan's work into 3 registers. Lacan is part of 3 registers, so I divide his work into 3 registers. One is the extremely original, outstanding. Second is repackaging.
Okay.
The third is rubbish. The repackaging part has to do with metaphorizing and generalizing Freud.
Okay.
For example, the concept of penis. Lacan turns it into a phallus. Metaphorizes this into a more general concept, that it is the desire of the other, meaning the mother.
Mother.
That the desire of the mother is the phallus I don't have. Now that may have to do with the mother may like money or power or whatever. So it generalizes the concept and metaphorizes the concept.
Right.
So from penis you move to a phallus, which is a metaphorization, and then you generalize it to cover anything, power, wealth, anything.
Any desire.
So metaphorizing Freud and generalizing it is much of Lacan. And one of the things he does here is to metaphorize and generalize the father into the paternal. Like Jung used to talk about the eros and the logos. So here the logos, the paternal, is the generalized father. And there Lacan brings in the idea of the big other. That you have the father, the small other, and then there is this big other. So the father is the voice of reality, the logos, the no, the inhibition. He is the representative of what is right and what is wrong. He puts a boundary to the march of reality. He brings in reality in the garden of eros. but there is something beyond him of which he himself at times is only an expression, a small expression, that is the big other.
Hmm.
So if the father is thought of as the small other, even at times the mother can be included in the small other,
Yes.
or somebody else can be included in the small other, but then there are things beyond the individual into which the individual finds himself, like
Hmm.
language, culture,
Hmm.
law, history.
Spiritual. Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they constitute a system of things in the atmosphere which are real, very powerful, and beyond any individual.
Hmm.
So they constitute that big other. And obviously, they don't fall from heaven. And therefore, the big other also has roots. So the law, the custom would have roots in history, in political events in history. And then that itself will have roots in an even more ancient culture. And that would still have roots in geography, which is called the mother of cultures. And all of that, the mother of culture, the geography, the genius of that place, the revelations of some scriptures happening in that place, and the real life events as they happen, the surreal and the real, both come together. The genius and the flow of everyday, every person event, they come together and they constitute that big other. So I always say the big other also has its father and the mother.
Yes.
So there is a father of the big other and there is a mother of the big other.
I was about to say that.
And uh, if we look as children, we internalize all of it, not only the big other, but also the sources of the big other.
And
And this is
extended others.
yeah, and this is very important. For example, take a few examples. Let us say a child growing up in Palestine today
Hmm.
or Sri Lanka a few years back. What does he see? What is put before him is an outcome of history. For him, the historical big other is alive in vividness. It's like a live,
Hmm. Hmm.
very different from you and me. For you and me, the history is important, but not as alive as somebody in a conflict situation.
So,
So for him, the fashioning of his life, his morals, his paternal, his courage, his masculinity has not to do more with the big other than with the small other.
so,
So that's also a very important part of children finding fathers, the big fathers.
yeah, in that case, it's not just the natural calamities. Sometimes the financial crisis of the family itself is the big other.
Right? For
Because it
example,
governs everyone and all the sources and resources of the family.
say for example, the collapse of Russia and the whole country is in economic trouble.
Mhm.
Now, the economic aspect of the big other would have played a very important role in many a child's life.
Mm.
They would still have impressions, indelible impressions even today. Similarly, the partition in India
Mm.
and children growing up in that era, or when the Hindu Holocaust was committed by so many invaders multiple times, and people who lived through that, and children who grew up with the consequences of it, or the loot of the Europeans in last century, and children
Mm.
who grew up in the consequences of that loot, or the 1857 carnage, and those who suffered directly or indirectly. For them, the experience of the big other was a defining moment in paternal engagement in the psyche. So this also is very important, the big other, how it plays out, because many times you just don't have a choice of good and bad, you just have a choice of bad and worse, defined by the framework of the big other.
So, what about inadequate fathers? How does it play out in our day to day adult life every day?
There is a very good book by a psychoanalyst on this: Broken Fathers, Broken Sons.
Mhm.
Dr. Gargolo, very good psychoanalyst, has written this book. It's quite autobiographical.
Okay.
And he makes a very good statement there. He says, um, given what my grandfather was and given what my grandmother was, what my father was had to happen. That does not in any way absolve him. That does not create a situation where you admire the traumas that happened,
Hmm.
but you understand. So you don't absolve it anybody, you don't admire anybody for the trauma, but you now understand it. That
Hmm.
given my grandparents, given their situation, that period, historical period, my father had to be what he was. And this theme is brought up by him that it takes quite a long time for children of broken fathers to really collect themselves because they have internalized a very broken father. They are not actualize their masculinity, their courage, their enterprising nature. Because the mother is then just trudging around somehow to make the family survive and just to roll on to the next month. So it's very difficult for this group to really be confident, be positive, and feel the world is a safe place. Exceptionally, a few of them actually grow better in this situation, in the sense there is no control of the father. So those who have some narcissistic constellation and have some ego strength, they grow up better and they
Hmm.
feel an edible victory over an inadequate father. Jung is an example. Jung's father was totally inadequate. Bill Clinton, the ex-US president, was an example. So this is where in exceptions, the inadequate father or the absent father have worked to the favor of the child, but that's an exception, not the rule. The rule is the man himself is broken as he sees a broken father. And he has to work long on himself to consolidate and bring himself together. And it takes years and it needs a good father figure, a good mentor figure for the person to really heal himself, internalize him, and then get on with life. And often this retards the progress, the achievement by 5 to 10 years.
Hmm.
What he should have got at 35, he gets at 45. What he should have got at 45, he gets at 55. It's a heavy price to pay for an inadequate father. Some of them, some children also pay a price in terms of relationships, of thinking themselves not good enough, that they would be chosen by the type of women they like. Some of them also face sexual problems of not being adequately man enough. And that is true even of very attacking fathers.
Hmm.
Some of these issues come up in inadequate fathers. It's a very tragic situation. And unfortunately, in a developing country or underdeveloped country, a large number of fathers are seen as inadequate. And it's compounded by the fact that the mother also often tells the child that the father is inadequate. He is not good enough. And occasionally is that he is good for nothing. That also fortifies in the child's mind the inadequate father. One of the good things is that today, because of the media, there are more avenues to internalize a surreal father.
Yeah, but are there any?
That's also true.
How about these fused narcissistic or fused dependent fathers?
The fused narcissistic father makes a hell of the child's life because the child is then an extension of the father. He doesn't have a mind of his. And when the child grows up, he finds it very difficult to detach. And more often than not, even if they detach at the surface, they reattach to somebody who is a father substitute. And in case of women, this becomes very difficult because then they find another narcissist and that narcissist exploits them. Sexually also, financially also, socially also. So that round of exploitation just doesn't end. I have seen people never get out of it. It's very difficult to get out of fusion. Once you are fused with somebody and experience fusion for a long time, it's very difficult to live with boundaries.
Narcissists do have a tendency to fuse.
Correct? That is the danger.
Just the way dependent seek fusion, even narcissists seek fusion.
Their seeking fusion is one thing. Their being partly fused with somebody is quite another thing. But we are talking of the third possibility where it's a massive fusion.
Mm.
Like as you rightly pointed out, in by and large, in most relationships, there is an element of fusion. And more of it in personality disorders. But we are talking of a third situation far more than the normal fusion, even in personality disorder. It's a massive fusion. And this
Mm.
massive fusion that we are referring to can happen with mothers and fathers both.
Oh.
And you can have either of the gendered child fused, like you can have a girl child fused to a girl mother, to a narcissistic mother. You can have a girl child fused to a narcissistic father, or you can have a boy child fused to a narcissistic father. It's terrible. It's very difficult to get out of it. I have had many clients who are still struggling in their middle ages to still get out of fusion. And why I have said somewhere else that there are three things about fusion which are addictive.
Uh-huh.
One is safety.
Mm.
Second is intensity. Third is authenticity. And fourth is ecstasy. These four are so
Wow.
addictive that it's very difficult to get out of it. And the moment somebody has tested it for a long time, he gets into a relationship, there's this addiction, the call of the addiction to again get back into a fusion state.
Yeah.
So Margaret Mahler only talked about the natural impetus to fusion.
Mm.
Actually, these are the four reasons apart from the natural impetus.
Oh. So it was ecstasy, intensity,
Safety, authenticity.
safety, and authenticity. Really?
When you are fused, in many cases, you are able to be authentic.
Quite subjective.
You are looking at it from that point, okay. From the victim point of view, authenticity will not come.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
From the
yeah. I'm
perpetrator
on the other
point of
side.
view, authenticity will come.
Okay.
From a perpetrator point, like there are two people fusing, let's say a
Yes,
dependent
yes.
and narcissist,
Yes, yes.
or a narcissistic father and a child. And the child, even if he's not dependent, he will get trained into dependence.
Fair enough.
Now, from the father's side, it will be the uh,
Prop-
intensity, the intensity, the authenticity, and the power.
Okay. Okay.
It's like what Kohut calls self-other experiences.
Mm.
That you have the other who is actually fused with you. So there are two bodies and one mind. The other is experienced almost as an extension of oneself.
Mm.
And this experience with the other is not a normal I other experience. Kohut calls it the self other experience. And Kohut puts a dash between the two, self other, meaning the two are not separate, they are one.
Fun.
It's self hyphen other, the self other. It's not self other, it is
Mm.
hyphen other. So that is one part. The dependent will feel
Safe.
safety in a strange sense.
Mm.
He will not feel safe in the sense that the narcissist can attack, but he will feel safe he will save me from everyone else.
Yeah, refuge. It's a kind of a refuge.
Yeah. He will save me from everyone else. That
Everyone
I'm not
else.
good enough to face the world. He will save me from the world.
Hmm, hmm.
Now, he won't save me from himself, but he will save me from the world. And therefore, in that fusion, both of them will feel ecstasy. And therefore, one of the problems with dependence is the problem of loss. And in that problem of loss, there is this anxiety of death. There is this high
Hmm.
stress of high sensitivity. And there is this loss of ecstasy of fusion with the narcissist. So I have seen people trying to break free, both men and women, from mothers and fathers who are narcissistic and fused in relationship, and they find it very difficult. But what happens is that over a period of time with therapy, they are able to distance themselves.
Because now the therapist there as an internalizing good object.
Correct. So they internalize the therapist to some extent, and largely they distance themselves
Yes, yes, yes.
because they see over a period of time the cost of fusion.
It takes very long-term therapy for such cases,
Right.
3 to 5 years minimum. With um, yeah, there's a lot of work to be done there.
Correct.
Because
Because
then even after the acceptance, the grief starts.
grief starts, and when you give it up, uh, it's like closing the split.
True.
That you give up that terror, you give up that tyranny. At the same time, you also give up that safety and that ecstasy. And the moment you put boundary and you say it's a healthy relationship between two mature consenting individuals where the consent has been taken and consciously boundary has been, these things are legally look very good, but they don't have that intensity and the ecstasy of fusion. And therefore, they become more mechanical, bland, and tasteless relationships.
Ecstasy is a big criteria there. Big criteria.
So there is always a trade-off between safety and intensity. And this is the problem of anybody with a personality disorder, that he likes somebody who also has a personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And if we find somebody healthy, all the boxes are ticked, but he does not feel that authenticity and that intensity.
And we think it's chemistry. It is
So
psychochemistry.
it's like cognitively everything is correct and affectively everything is off track.
Yeah.
All the boxes are ticked.
We need to have an episode on this for sure. This is something very prevailing right now, as we see a lot of PDs and the kind of fusion people are having is definitely we'll explore that if you
Sure,
have time.
sure, we can do it.
So how does the father feature in adult pathology?
Uh, Essentially, if you want to use two words, you can call superego pathology, ego pathology in
Ah,
analytic terms, broadly, broad strokes.
perfect.
But if you want to go more specific, granular, and use DSM words, then too much of superego, too little of superego.
Mm,
So too little of it will lead to addiction disorders, impulse disorders, sociopathy, psychopathy. Too much of it will lead to guilt pathology. It can lead to OCDs. It can lead to depression. It can lead to certain forms of anxiety.
mm,
It can lead to certain forms of self-destruction,
mm.
which can also be addiction, which may be something else.
Something else.
So this is the superego spectrum. In ego spectrum, we are looking largely at ego strength.
Mm,
And therefore, we will look at easy ego disintegration, and that would mean borderline, uh, impulse control, or psychosis, or in certain cases, histrionicity or bipolar. So
mm,
we are looking at all of this where the father, the paternal, will play a key role. On the terror side, if we are looking at avoidant or paranoid
mm,
or delusion of persecution, then we are looking at attacking father,
mm.
the attacking paternal.
Right.
You can see in a variety of chapters across DSM, there will be a large number of disorders where the paternal plays a role and there the father will play a role.
Absent father would create what kind of pathology?
Absent,
Physically absent.
absent father will lead to narcissism. In some cases, I'm not saying all of them,
Yes.
but it will make an appearance in some forms of narcissism, some forms of dependence, in some forms of anxiety,
Hmm.
and in some forms of addiction.
Hmm.
Because it can mean lack of ego strength, lack of protection. So you can have all the entire safety range, entire masculinity internalization range, and then an exception, a group of exception where they are able to go narcissistic, psychopathic, because there is no pattern.
Check for bisexuality, what it would be from what kind of.
Uh, if somebody is, say, on the borderline, whether he might act out or not act out, and then you have an absent father and the person develops more femininity, that may be one way of looking at it.
Absent father.
Absent father. That somebody who is even more feminine, naturally speaking, is not able to evoke whatever masculinity is there in him, and therefore is pushed more on the feminine side than he would be.
It can also be an object loss equals to object gain. No father, so.
Correct? In some cases, it can also lead to guilt of having killed the father out of the Oedipal rage.
Oh, yeah. How can
If
we
the, fa-
forget that?
the father is absent,
Hmm.
or in some cases, if the femininity is very high, one can also experience it as an abandonment by the father, just as this abandonment by the mother.
Right, right.
So we don't know what exact specific form it takes, but certain generalizations we can make out of the difficulties of the absent father. But anyway, you see the absent father will make an appearance in, say, 10-15 disorders, attacking
Hmm.
father and the 25 disorders,
Hmm.
hyper idealistic father, another 20 disorders, father
Hmm.
without any morals, another 10 disorders. So you can see the father making appearance in across the DSM.
How does it show up in therapy space?
First is in transference,
Hmm.
that whatever is the story with the father will be played with the therapist in transference. Second will be dealing with the frame, because the frame is the pattern. The function of the therapy is very eros.
True.
Occasionally, the paternal comes in the form of interpretation, but generally it is very holding and very eros,
Oh, never thought it that way.
that you let go, you support, you hold, you take the side, you see the positive in the negative, you don't see the negative in the negative. So, in a functional sense, it's largely eros, occasionally punctuated by the paternal when the interpretation comes. But the frame is largely paternal.
As in because of the authority there?
The way the frame is constituted, that you will come at the same place, same time, same day,
Okay.
it's a discipline. That you will pay the pre-decided amount, you can't negotiate. That you will talk about yourself, but the therapist will not self-reveal. These are like do's and don'ts put by the father. So the frame is quite paternal. So the attack comes on the frame. The attack on
Amazing.
the father comes as an attack on the frame. And the two things we see is not paying on time or not coming on time. So not coming on time or not paying on time, or not obeying the do's and don'ts of therapy. Say not calling you after the therapy hours, or not doing free association. These are all attacks on the frame.
No, I always used to think it's the other way around, that the therapy space is all nurturing, healing, caring womb of a mother, and the therapist is the father there. Now I just realize it's
The therapist is both the father and the mother, because that hermaphrodite creature, he becomes the father when he gets into interpretation,
interpretation.
acceptance, puncturing the fantasy,
Oops.
asking to feel the feelings which the patient does not want to feel,
Bringing in the reality and
bringing
facts.
in the reality, making him do the difficult things for his own good. So that is the father element, the paternal element in the therapist. But when he is holding, he is letting go, he is supporting, he is not taking a moral stance, he is listening to the blabbering without saying anything, he is tolerating things. Those are the mother elements. So in the functional flow of therapy, it's more eros and less logos, less paternal.
Is it only the psychoanalytic approach which is more eros and less logos? If we be holistic, it is more logos.
Psychoanalytic is far more in eros than any other form.
Exactly. Otherwise, because if we see the Rogerians or if we see the holistic approach, they are more of balance of both yin yang, eros, logos.
Correct. And
While
if you go more on the cognitive side, you will have higher paternal.
higher paternal.
They are logos heavy. We are eros heavy. And there will be some which have a balance of eros and logos. So we see in therapy, there is an attack on the frame as a transferential attack on the father.
Wow.
There is an attack on the therapist as a transferential attack of the father. There can be projective identification into the therapist of feelings towards the father. There can be, the father also comes in the forms of a search, that the projection of an omnipotent father is there on the therapist, naturally done, so that one can project and then internalize. There is testing of the father. Is the father able to contain me? Is the father able to hold me within limits? And
So
many people,
ideally, who's the right container, the father or the mother? I know it's a very lame question, but if we see, what would
the
be the ideal? Mother would be the right container.
mother is a larger container than the father.
There's no right or wrong.
No, both of them have to do containment in real world also.
Right, right.
Like both of them have to contain the tantrums of the child.
Hmm.
But in real life also and theoretically also, the mother is a far larger container than the father. The mother is more eros and a larger container than the father. And in therapy also it is true that the more paternal stance a therapist takes, the less container he will be, and the more interpreter he will be. So the more you move from Kohut to Freud, the more you will interpret and less you will contain. As you move from Freud to Kohut, you will be more of a container. The eros element will increase as you move from Freud to Kohut. And the logos element will increase as you move from Kohut to Freud. So across the schools also, the stance of the therapist, how much of it is eros and how much of it is logos, that stance of the therapist also changes from school to school.
Right, right.
If you look at the Kleinian school, it will be the highest logos. The Freudian will be second highest. The Jungian will be third highest. Winnicottian fourth, and Kohut will be the last. So, so internalizing the good, reliable, stable father is a very important aspect of therapy, and that often requires long time, and the person will test the therapist before it can be done.
Mhm.
And that testing may go, not only involve a lot of testing inside the room, he might even check up your credentials in the real world so far as he can. So it's quite common for patients to open the Facebook pages of therapists and find out what is there. So it's a very important element of therapy to heal that father wound, by finding a good father in the therapist, and in transference and projective identification, working out issues with the father as much as analytically and as much as with help from analysis, making changes in real life. And as I said, it can also create dysfunctionality by attacks on the father transferentially on the frame or on the therapist.
How do we actually proceed to this healing of father wound?
First is recognition. It's easy to accept a mother wound. It seems strange to accept a father wound, but actually it is quite common. And one of the difficulties there is when we go inside deeply, to use a strange word, deeply deep, so to speak, uh, we come across very primal Kleinian concepts of split, of a combination of heterosexuality and homosexuality, a combination of aggression and sexuality, a strange kind of concoction, a strange kind of hermaphrodite drive, often deep inside the psyche. And that is where there are two parts of it. First is recognition, second is mapping out the manifestation, where all in life is manifesting, analyze with the therapist, make out some sort of a working plan and start
Mm.
implementing. But the real depth happens, as I said, one is in internalization, and second, in a way, is by going deep and healing those very, very early life deep seated complexes, which may be both heterosexual, homosexual, a combination of both of them with strange kind of aggressive drives, and a different, very nebulous primal concoction that you find
Mm.
deep inside. And most people are too afraid really to go that deep. It also takes very long therapy and very well trained therapist, and should I say, even a insightful, intelligent patient to really go that deep. So this is the way we proceed to heal it, but essentially it is by providing safety, containment, and paternal support. It's very important, paternal support. That is very important in therapy to help heal the fatherhood.
Does holistic healing have something to offer on healing this father wound which we are talking about?
Quite something. In fact, in holistic healing, in homeopathy, in certain forms of tantra, which goes into idol worship and getting into relationship with those idols, because the idols no longer remain idols, they become personalities as one starts moving inside from that concrete to that subjective inside. And of course, it needs a guru, but internalization of a good guru as a good father figure, internalization of the deity, or internalization of all pervading God, use of certain herbs, use of certain yogic practices. Some of them are useful for catharsis. One thing we forgot, catharsis is also a very important element in healing the father wound.
Mhm.
Catharsis during therapy. So some of those things help catharsis, some of those things help internalization, and some of those things help let loose the arrested process so that it flows ahead. So we don't know exactly how that mechanism works. That's why we put it in holistic healing as a craft rather than an objective science. But there are quite some elements in holistic healing. In fact, any self-development system will have to deal with motherhood and fatherhood in some way or the other. There is no escape. So any self-development system which has survived for more than 100 years would have some good insight, some good tools to heal the mother wound and the father wound.
One more grounding and humbling conversation. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Pete. See you again.